Hello and welcome back to my tile map tools tutorial thing in Unity. Today we are going to be covering merging two grids or two tile maps that you've created. What I was thinking of for this is, say you had like an overworld and you had like a load of buildings that you created separately in a different tile map, just so you wouldn't have to edit the entire overworld while you're just making one building. I was thinking that you could have something that merges the two maps, so you could just have like multiple instances of one, or whatever. And this is basically what I have come up with. So if we just paint, what was it? No sprite, sorry. Got to select something. That's a little glitch I've got to fix. So yeah, so say if you wanted to merge this map with the one that was here, because we had this one done previously, I will just enable the cursor to demonstrate another feature. So yeah, so you can see now that the cursor is a lot bigger to reflect the size of the tile map, as it won't just be one, or the size of this tile map that we are merging with the current one that's in the scene. So if we just hold down Alt and click, we'll see that they're now merged. And again, if we do this, we can do that, and yeah. And likewise, it will change size, the cursor, based on whatever the tile map is. So you can see here that we can just click there, and it will draw a large section of that. And it will even sort out multiple layers based on the sorting order. So if the if the current tile map in the scene and the one you're trying to use as a brush have identical sorting orders on a layer, then those two layers will be merged, else it will create another layer. So as you can see here, this map that I'm currently using has two layers, a blank one on top of some blue painted tiles. So if I click here, it will create the new blank layer and then have like all the bluey tiles underneath that on the initial layer. And you'll see here that we can increase the active sorting order and bring that to the front, and still decrease it, and all that good stuff. So let's get on to the code. Okay, so just one quick change I wanted to make from code that we did last time. It's an easy change, just one line in a couple of places. But yeah, we've got this fairly long thing because I've not added the import, so I just had to call it in the line. So we've got Unity editor.scene management, .editor scene manager, .mark scene dirty, Unity editor.scene management, .editor scene manager, .get active scene. Now what this does is it will mark the current scene that's open as being dirty. So that's basically like saying to Unity that something has changed with the scene, so we should reserialize it, and then it will save it all. The reason we're doing this is because when you'd like make a tile map and save it and close Unity, if you reopened Unity, it wouldn't be in the scene for some reason, but it would still be saved as a prefab in the folder structure, which is kind of odd. So by having this line here, it will mark the scene as, well, dirty. So that way it will tell Unity to save the scene again, and we will have a scene. The tile map will remain in the scene if new scenes are loaded or Unity's closed or whatever. So yeah. This is called in the for expand grid methods, and I believe in the tile chunk when we are changing a tile. Yep, so if we change a tile here, so on set tile, it will call it to make sure that the scene is refreshed. And again, in this new method, I think it's new, for set tile with the X, Y, and T, it also calls it if we're changing a tile there. So that was one change I made. Okay, so I've got a couple of methods that I just want to cover before we get onto the meat of how the layers are merged. So the first off is in the tile chunk class. I'll remember to zoom in this time. Zoom in. There we go. With the down, get tile. One is actually a new variation of get tile method, which basically just takes an two ints, an x and a y coordinate, and that'll just return basically the tile in the grid, that set of indexes. Simple. Next we have the second one we have is a method that merges the two tile chunks. So it's provided with a tile chunk. This will be the one in the prefab that you wanted to paint onto the one in the scene, like in the demo. I can just get rid of that debug.log. So basically what it does, it goes through 0 to 4 on the Y, 0 to 4 on the X. It will grab the tile using this new get tile overload that I made. and it will get the to merge with. It will get the tile off the prefab, and then if this tile is not blank, then it will set the tile on the tile map in the scene to be whatever the game object that is. Sorry. Yeah, so it will just set it to be set the tile at that X and Y coordinate to be the game object that it got from the prefab at that coordinate set. Let's get rid of these because we don't need them. Sorry. And I think set tile was new overload, but it wasn't that different. Yes. Well, if I didn't, yeah, it just takes an X and Y and the game object, and it will instantiate the object at that particular set of coordinates. I think I've covered this in a previous tutorial, so I won't cover it again. But yeah, basically, restore the old tile, instantiate the new one, and store it. Get the sorting order and that of the tiles. Set the tile as a new position in the array. Oh, sorry. So set the sorting order. Set the transforms. And set the actual game object reference to the tile. And we check for programmable tiles, and then we destroy the old one side. Okay, so next up we have a new overload to create a new layer, which is stored in the level creator script. Basically, the only difference is that it takes an integer for the sorting order, and it returns the actual layer, which we needed to do for when we have layers in the prefab that we're painting that weren't in the current tile map in the scene. So we need to create a new layer and then be able to access it immediately. So first off, we instantiate a new layer. Then we get the layer and we set the layer. Actually, yeah, the layer. I think that. Where is it? Reset. Resets. Yeah, that just clears all the layer. Sorry. So we get a layer. We just instantiate like a blank one. Oh, sorry. We instantiate the last one in the list because that way we can guarantee that it'll be the correct size, correct dimension. Sorry, and it'll have everything set up. We then call reset to make it all blank, so all the tiles are the same sort of semi-transparent one we're using as the base. We set the layer name, so it'll be whatever sorting order is provided. We set the parent of the game object to be this level creator game object. We add it to the current list of layers, and we set the object to be dirty, and so we get serialized, and then we return it to the calling script. Okay, so now we get on to the big one, which is the actual merging of the tile maps. So first off, we just have a quick check to make sure that we actually have a level creator, a value is stored in the level creator.me.prefab to paint, and there's a moth in the corner of my eye. Shit. Oh well, you can live for now. So yeah, this basically makes sure that, well, the prefab that we're wanting to paint is stored in that variable. So we basically make sure that it exists before we do anything. And if it doesn't, it just brings up an error message, as we have done before. From it. I'm just gonna... Oh no, it's fucking off on my computer. Nope. Okay. First off, we get the level creator script off the prefab. So, yeah. We need to do this because we have a singleton for level creator. So that will be storing, the singleton will be storing the current one in the scene. So in this case, it will be, this tile map here on the inspector. Where is it? Yep, it'll be storing this. But we can also grab one off the prefab, which will be like that. So if you understand what I'm getting at there. Next off, once we've got that, we go through all the layers in the prefab we've got, so not the one that's in the scene. We get the layer. So basically we get the layer script off the layer game object, because remember that we store the layers and rows as game objects, not the actual script instance. And we store that under layer to paint. So that is the a brush or what we're copying over basically. And the layer to paint on, which is also a layer script, is basically just this. It might not be this because this is only called on the one of the script. It can be called on any script and it'll do it for all the layers, but yeah, because I just need access to the layers at the moment. So yeah, that probably was a bad programming practice, but whatever, it works. And so yeah, this is the layer we're painting on. We need to store this, store some kind of value in this script, because we might not. We only use it like if the layer already exists, so we store it there. So this is just set to this as a default. And boolean for does order exist. That is basically saying, basically we're going to go through all the layers in the tile map in the scene and check if two sorting orders match, in which case we can merge the layers. Otherwise, we need to create a new one on the tile map in the scene to put all the stuff from the prefab on. So basically, go through all the layers in the tile map in the scene, which is stored under the singleton here. We get the layer here, and we basically check if the two sorting orders match. We set does order exist to 2. We store that layer we found in the layer to paint on variable, and we can break. So that basically says, all right, we don't need to go through the loop anymore. We found what we want. And if we did, and it would just go 10 odd to false. So yeah. After that, we come to a sort of split here. So if we have found a layer which has a matching sorting order, then we go to this, which this code is basically identical to. I've basically been using it for yeah, you'll have seen it if you use it in the other tutorial. Basically what it does is it gets a selection of chunks around the mouse's position, so that we don't have to look through all the chunks in the tile map, just the ones of the correct size. So we're basically using the dimensions of the prefab, so the number of chunks and the number of rows to act as height and width. And then we're defining bounds, so it'll be the width divided by 2 and the height divided by 2, both taken and added to the y-index. So if you think it'll have I think it's a top left and bottom right corner, which we can use to define an area that we search for chunks in, and then we use those to paint on rather than just using all of them. Then yeah, and then we have a top right and bottom left corner as well. I don't think we actually use that one, do we? No, we don't actually use these. All right, let me just check. Yeah, we don't use them. Sorry, that's usually just for when we're not painting directly onto chunks, rather than if we're having to work out like small subsections of chunks. That's why we use them, but we don't need that for this, so just get rid of it. And that says chun. Oh well. So yeah. So these basically just define the corners, the area of which we're going to sample chunks out of the tile map, and we'll get them. Then we cycle through these, so we have X from the low bound to the high bound of chunks, and the same for Y. So that will basically cycle through all these chunks that we found, and it will. By doing this, it may give us a value that is greater than the size of the tile map if we are if the mouse is near to the edge of the tile map. So what we have here is a quick check just to make sure that we don't do anything that's out of range. So if it's more than if the x and y's are more than or equal to 0, and the x is less than the number of tiles chunks in a row, and the y is less than the number of rows. Just to make sure that we don't get an index out of range exception. All right. So first off, we need to get 2 chunks now with the information we've got. So first off is the chunk that we're going to be painting onto. So first off, we have the row. We get the row, which is basically just a layer to paint on. We get the rows of tiles, and we use the y coordinate, so that's fine. And we get the row script off that game object, and then we just store it on row on tile map. Sorry, I'm going to burp. Sorry about that. Next, we want to get the tile chunk that we're painting on. So you go in this row on tile map, we get the tiles as chunks, and we just use the x coordinate as well, the x coordinate. It gets us the correct chunk in that row, and that is the one we are going to paint on. Next, we need to do a similar thing for the actual prefab. But since it's not technically in the world, we just need to do a little bit of different maths to do it. So since we're going from like low to high, we can use the similar x and y values to work out what the correct index should be to paint it into the world. So we take the low bound, the respective low bound away from the index that we're using. So in this case, it's y minus the y chunk low bound. And this will always start us at 0, I believe. Yeah, because indexes can't be lower than 0. So yeah. So this will get us a number between 0 and, whatever. And that will allow us to access it'll allow us access to the rows and chunks in the prefab, which we want to get out in the correct order. So it'll paint them, so it'll paint them in the correct order and it'll look like it did when you were editing it. Yeah, I think you had a point. So yeah, and similarly we've done here, instead of just using x, we use x minus x chunk low bound. And finally, we call the merge tile chunks method that I mentioned earlier. We call it on this tile chunk on Tilemap. So on this first one we got, which is from the current one that's in the scene, and we pass into it as an argument the chunk that we found on the prefab. And that then goes and will paint over all the tiles on the tile chunk on Tilemap. That's what that does. Yeah. If we didn't have a layer, pretty much all the same code happens, but instead of layer to paint on being set here, where we found an identical layer, we use the level creator.me.create new layer with the sorting order of the layer that did not have a sorting order to match. And then other than that, it's identical. We don't actually need this code. It was just a remnant that I've forgotten to take it out, so I'll remove that now. And there we go. Right. So yeah, hopefully that made sense. Okay, so now we're going to get onto the how the cursor works. So first off, we have this method to calculate how big the prefab should be, which will then affect how big the cursor will be to give you an accurate reflection of what the area you're going to paint. So yeah, we don't need the debug.log error, sorry. So if the prefab is null, it will just return, it won't do anything. Otherwise, it will get the level creator script and then get a layer off of that. It'll get the level creator off the prefab that you want to paint. Then it will get the first layer off that level creator. And then it will calculate the height of it by being the number of rows. So that is the number of rows times 5, because each row is 5 Unity units in height, because each tile is 1 unit, and 5 tiles and a height of a row, because the chunks are 5 by 5. And we do a similar thing for the rows. We get the number of tile chunks in a row, and get a count of that, and we multiply that by 5, because again, the tile chunks are 5 wide, and this is basically just a list of all the chunks in a row, and that'll be the same for every row in the layer. So yeah, and that is what we use to define our height of the prefab and width of the prefab. Now this is used, sorry, I should just mention, we've got 4 new variables after this. We've got a game object, prefab to paint, which is set in the custom inspector, which I will go over in a minute. We've got a boolean to paint prefab, whether this will be saying, right, are we painting a prefab or not? Yeah, so same as like the painting single or painting area. Next we've got the width of the prefab and the height of the prefab, which are pretty self-explanatory. And finally, we've got some changes to the set cursor position. So first off is if we are painting the prefab, if we are painting a prefab, then we call that calculate prefab texture size. And we set the cursor sprite to be the cursor sprite for some reason. And then we set the scale of the cursor to be the width of the prefab and the height of the prefab and 1. So that'll just change the size. So as you can see in the thing, if we switch prefab to paint, yeah, you'll see that it gets bigger or smaller or whatever, you know. We can still paint on it, why not? So yeah, that's how that works. Otherwise, we just set it to 111, so that'll be the size of just one tile. And I think the setting cursor was just because I was trying to do something where it put the preview texture of the like actual tile map we were merging onto the sprite renderer, but it didn't really work, so I got rid of it. Next up, so if we since basically what is it? How do I explain this? If I'll get to it eventually. Sorry. So basically, when we're painting prefabs, it can only copy one whole chunk onto one whole chunk. So there's no like, so it sort of moves in 5x5 increments, if you get what I mean. And basically, if the prefab, if you're painting a prefab, it will reflect this by getting the center tile. So we get the active layer, we get the row by using the active layer.y index, and we get the row. Sorry. All right. Basically, we wanted to get the center tile of the chunk that the mouse is over, and use that to act as a position to put the cursor at, because that will basically keep it centered on chunks. It'll move chunk by chunk rather than just freeform. So, because that's what we want, because that'll more accurately reflect where you're going to place the prefab. We do this by looking at the active layer, so that is just the current layer. We then go through its rows of tiles, and using its own y index, which is, if you've forgotten, that is basically where the mouse is. If I can find the tile set thing right up at the top. Yeah, so basically we work out where the mouse is based on the bottom left tile and the mouse position. So, and that'll work out the chunk. And then we can use these index values to access that chunk. So we use that index, we get the row, and then we use that row script to get the tiles as chunks, and then we use the x index to get the tile, and we use the new get tile method we made to get the middle tile. So remember, since indexes begin at 0, it is 2, 2 is the center tile, because it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 for indexes, so 2 is the middle one. And we get that game object, and then we can just set the cursor to be that game object's position. And that is how we bind the cursor to only move with chunks rather than just individual tiles. And again, if we're not doing that, we just do normally, whereas we set the position of the cursor to be the x and y of the mouse, which is rounded. Okay. Just as one thing I may have forgotten quickly to show you, which is actually in the layer script. Sorry, I just need to show you where these methods are called from, basically. So in the, method? In the should we paint tile method, it will, at the end, we've added a check for if levelcreator.me.paintPrefab is true, which levelcreator.me.paintPrefab is just the boolean to say whether we're painting a prefab or not. We should have a conditions check. If we press a mouse button and if it's the mouse going up, and if we are holding Alt and the mouse button is the left mouse button, it will call the merge tile maps button method, which we've already been over. Yeah, that's how it's all called. Next, we'll go on to the actual GUI of it. So first off, we just added some buttons just to flick that boolean on and off. So if I can find it, so it's paint single, paint square, spray can, paint existing tile map. So basically we've got a button saying, do you want to paint existing tile map, and whether it's selected or not. And if you select it, it will set current tile map.paint prefab to true. And then it will call the calculate prefab texture size again, just in case. And this is in the, I think this is in the bit. Yeah, this is in the fourth little tab thing on the thing. On the thing. So good at describing this shit. Yeah. And again, all the existing buttons, so like paint area, erase single, whatever, will need to have a condition added setting this paint prefab to false, just to make sure none of them conflict with each other. And yeah. And if paint prefab is true, so this is the GUI we draw for if we are painting the prefab. So if it's null, we don't do anything here, just at the top. But if it's not null, we basically just do a little map, little texture saying the current one we're drawing. So I've got a label saying we're merging the current with X tile map, and then we draw the asset preview of that particular tile map using the current tile map.prefab to paint. And do that drawing box and end the horizontal because we want that to appear adjacent to each other. Next up, we draw a load of buttons for deciding to which tile map that you want to actually choose. This is done in the same way as the loading and saving buttons because it's basically the same thing. So we use the existing save load control to get all the prefabs, which was covered in the saving and loading prefabs, I believe. Sorry. And for each of these tile maps, we basically draw them in rows for cleanliness. So for X, if X or Y is 0, we begin a vertical for Y and a horizontal for X. And yeah, that basically just go over it. That has been covered in the saving and loading when I went into more detail about how that particular bit of GUI code works. So go watch that video if you want to know. It just basically draws it in rows, and then if the X value reaches a certain point, it'll go back to 0 and increase the Y, so draw a new row. So yeah, basically we begin a vertical for each button. We get the asset preview and draw that, and we get draw the label. Sorry, we draw a label of the name of the prefab that we wanted to draw, we're drawing the button for, and then we draw the actual button, which contains the texture, which we got from the asset preview, and then we end the vertical. And here you can see if X is 3, then we end the vertical, and if Y is 30, then we end the. If X is 3, we end the horizontal. If Y is 30, we end the vertical. Just to add a hard limit, which is probably a bad idea. I'm going to actually re-go over some of the stuff for the last episode, which should be next week. So yeah, I don't think there was anything else. No, I don't believe so. Yeah, that was pretty much it. So I'll just give you a quick demo of what we've achieved in this current episode. So I'll just reset this quickly. Initialize, expand the grid. So what we can do basically with what we've done here today is we can select an existing tile map we've created and paint it into another tile map, just because that might be a useful feature you want. I don't know. It's your call, your life, your choice, etc. Based on how big or small these tile maps might be, we can just paint over them or whatever, and it'll reflect, the cursor will reflect that. And if you go back onto paint single, you can see that the cursor's got much smaller, and we can just paint yellow tiles all around the place, and it's all hunky-dory. Isn't that grand? Alright, so yeah, cheers for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that shit. I know my explanation of the actual code for the merging in the layer script may not be that great, so if you require help or something, just leave a comment and I will respond, or I could copy and paste the actual method in, or the commenting, because I've got a load of basically notes I wrote down here to help myself, so they could help you if you want them. You can either read them now, or I will copy and paste them if someone requests it. So yeah, go check out my shit on Itch.io. Yeah, Lara Quiet is Doing well, actually. It's just polishing it up now. I've even registered a company, Unit 02 Games Ltd. Ooh, scary adult stuff. So yeah, that'll be coming out end of this year, early next year. I wanted to try and hit either sort of early November or January. I'm not sure which one I will choose because I want to kind of get area time when there's not many games released, so that'll probably best be January. But other than that, yeah, there's other stuff on itch.io you can check out. The links will all be in the description. So cheers for watching and goodbye.